Joining us today is Karen Bescombe, freelance agri-blogger and writer, coming all the way from Trinidad and Tobago. And our man, thank you all for joining us, and for those of you viewing online, thanks very much. We encourage you to add your questions, comments, or discussion points as we go into his world, as he spent some time there in the West Bank in the Middle East, using social media and video and radio to connect communities, to send out public service announcements and other information, and is now working there at Burness Communications as co-director of Burness Digital, as I mentioned. So thank you all for tuning in and joining us today. Johannes, I'll hand it over to you.
Great, thanks. Thanks, Sam. A number of places in Latin America and Africa, but your longest assignment was in Ramallah and the West Bank. Can you tell us a bit about there?
And it was about, why are we talking about the West Bank when this is about social media and communicating with others around the world? And I think that the main reason here is, and from work in the West Bank, we were trying to reach people with an important message, and I think that rings true for a lot of people, in all different fields. So from everything from science to health to agriculture. The real objective of our West Bank was to inform people on a variety of different topics, and I think that we use social media to our benefit to reach people that we couldn't have reached before. So, as in my introduction, it was just very helpful in reaching people from a variety of different locations. As we all know, the events in the Middle East are a lot less money and with big results, and so that's what we decided to do.
Great. Denise?
Yeah, I'm maybe Miles, could you?
That's a really good question. Well, there was a variety of different outreach efforts that we were doing, but the primary purpose of the work was really to build a knowledge and understanding of what the Palestinian Authority's work was, so that the public, at least in the West Bank, would have a clear understanding of what the Palestinian Authority stood for, the services they offered, what their general purpose was. And we all take some of those things for granted, in the sense that when you go to the post office and you mail a letter, it goes from point A to point B, or when you go to get your driver's license, you take a number, you sit down, you wait for your turn. These are things that as far as the Palestinian Authority is concerned, they were really trying to instill confidence in those services, and our role was to work with people in a couple of different ministries across the Palestinian Authority to improve their the perception among the public, at least, of those services. So we, and this is a full disclaimer here, obviously there's, with everything with USAID and international development work, I think there's always a bit of complexity with the work involved, and I think that I learned a lot while I was out there, and I think that by going into for example, the Ministry of Transportation and saying, how can we help to make the process better for people to get their driver's licenses, they said that people weren't really understanding the process when they walked in the door until they got their driver's license. So we created a cartoon series to try and make that process a little bit smoother for people. And in the cartoon, we had characters taking a number from the system and sitting down, waiting their turn, and getting their driver's license, and then leaving with their driver's license. And it was a really simple, short cartoon that had a lot of, kind of funny moments in it. And when we shared that on Facebook, people reacted really well to it. And when we put the same cartoon, we could use just the audio on local radio stations, and it delivered the same messages. So the use of those cartoons was really helpful in explaining what the Palestinian Authority was trying to get across to people all across the West Bank.
And that was an effective way to communicate with them, and you saw some response and kind of input from those people?
Yeah, I think people love cartoons. They love humor. It's a good way to get across a fairly dry message. To be honest with you, I mean, it's certainly easy for me to talk about taking a number and sitting down and waiting in line to get your driver's license, but we all know that process is actually kind of boring. But if you use a cartoon, you can at least reach people in a funny way and get them to share it with their friends, and hopefully everybody learns. Like another really good example is we noticed that driving would throw trash out the window of their cars. We did a cartoon on that through Facebook. People react really, really well to those kinds of messages.
Why was social media sort of the right medium? Is that especially as bank? Is that the sort of the easiest tool to access in sort of a
something that's either totally off topic or something that's really offensive or spam? And I think we didn't want to be held back by that in the West Bank, and I still think that we, in the work that I do, a good example would be the Palestinian post office had kind of a rebrand. Will kind of reject it. So.
Yeah.
That actually, you've pipped us to storytelling, but I had a quick question before that, Miles. When we were talking, could you talk a little bit about that? I mean, what did you learn? How did it change the way you were looking at your own work, and how these social campaigns?
It did. I mean, I think in 2009, Facebook advertising was really new. Producing video was something that I'd already been working on for 4 or 5 years at that point, but video production has gotten simpler and simpler every year, and social media tools and the ability to reach people all over the world has also gotten simpler and simpler every year. And I think that in 2009 in the West Bank, it just really all started to come together, and it started to make sense more than it had in previous years. To give you an example, we produced a lot of video content. Like I said, I worked in Africa and Latin America, and we would produce a lot of video content on USAID projects in those countries, and we would make DVDs, and they would sit on a shelf, or they'd be used as a coffee coaster. I mean, quite honestly, they just weren't reaching people, and that was really tough because we would put a lot of effort into making videos to tell a story, and then there was no way to really get them out to people. But in 2009 in the West Bank, all of a sudden it started to make sense that we could use these tools that we have available to us for a message that we feel like is very important to reach people from that particular area. And now all of a sudden there was a way to do that that was more affordable than ever before. I think that's really where, in my career, light bulbs went off, and I just realized that's what I want to do. That's something that I think is really helpful to people in a variety of sectors.
Yeah, absolutely. Now you touched on. Oh, sorry. Go, Johannes.
Well, I'll go ahead and then you do. Okay. Well, I just wanted to ask you a very simple question, actually. How do you know that you're successful? I mean, obviously, you're saying now you see a lot more pickup of the videos. You see that people are sharing it. But do you collect numbers, or do you collect anecdotal evidence? Do you have reporting mechanisms? That would interest me.
Yeah, it's something that if 2009 was the moment that I realized what the tools were that we could use to reach people, I think now more than ever, and this is something that I'll go into in a little bit more detail later on in the talk, but we are beyond the stage now, at least in the work that we're doing at Burness, in that it's great to produce content, it's great to produce stories or photos or blogs or content that people will learn from. It's even better to promote it on social media, but I think in later on I'll go a little bit more detail, but analyzing those outreach efforts is really the new focus that we have. And you're right, it's really, really important. I mean, I think nowadays we have numbers that show us the impact of social media campaigns, the kind of views we get, the demographic results, the engagement levels, the cost per click. I mean, everything can be analyzed from very, very small levels of detail all the way up, and we can create really wonderful stories from these outreach efforts based on that data. And I think that that's where a lot of us are really focusing our efforts on now, is thinking beyond just the social media campaign and thinking about what our real objective is. So we do that now. I think in the days that I was working in the West Bank, it was all fairly new, and so I think we were tracking the results on Facebook, we were tracking the results on YouTube. It was harder because we were mixing in radio and newspaper and more traditional media, and so it was harder to really gauge those results. But now more than ever, yes, we definitely have a handle on that data.
Thanks.
Now, you touched on briefly there, Miles, working with people in the West Bank, in Africa, in Latin America, and I guess something that we've seen in Europe, the Americas, and I guess Australia as well, is the big uptake of mobile and using that as a key tool for communication and social media and that kind of thing. What sort of tools or devices were people connecting with you on in 2009 or more recently in Africa and Latin America? How are they getting that message through on social media? Is it on their smartphone or their mobile phone, or is it more of a traditional desktop computer?
I think the desktop computer has been kicked to the curb. I think everybody is really just, when we look at where people are clicking from, especially when we do outreach efforts now in Africa and in the Middle East, it's all mobile. It's all people watching videos on their phone. It's people interacting with Facebook on their phone. There certainly are uses for kind of more traditional web browser-based outreach, but mobile is, I think nowadays, in web design, we're just incorporating responsive design in website development because we know if your site doesn't scale properly, people have a hard time with it, and then they'll kind of abandon the effort. And so we want to try and keep people engaged, and we want to make it as easy as possible so that you don't have people dropping off quickly. And I think you're right. I mean, no matter where you are, and I'm sure you see this as well, Samuel, it's just mobile phone use is just the way people interact with the internet. So that's what we need to develop our content for.
Yeah, that's right. And I guess you sort of touched there on storytelling a little bit and developing video. What was the role that you used? I mean, you had cartoons and that kind of thing. How important was storytelling as part of your channel or medium? And you used video as well, you mentioned there as well, as a training tool and for online campaigns. How did that factor in?
It's kind of a funny thing to think back on what we were doing with video. I mean, in 2009, on a personal level, I'd really gotten into shooting video with DSLRs, which are the standard black, Nikon or Canon cameras that you can attach any lens you want and go to an interview and set up a really nice shot in full HD with a really nice lens and get really high quality video, really high quality audio. But if you can imagine for a second walking into a minister's office with a little DSLR and explaining to them that you wanted to do a video on, an outreach effort that we had. For example, we did a video on International Women's Day, and we wanted to have the women who worked in the Palestinian Authority tell their story. But they're used to television cameras that are enormous, these huge cameras, and we walked in with these little DSLRs and set up our little setup and got really high quality video, but it was a little comical in the sense that they weren't used to that at the time. I think now people are more used to it, and we continue to shoot with some DSLRs, but it's a really powerful tool. You can get amazing quality. You can get really powerful statements. The International Women's Day video that we did, for example, was, I think for a lot of people, we showed it at a number of events that we had, and people just hadn't really thought of it that way. They hadn't thought about the women that work in the Palestinian Authority and what that means. They hadn't thought about the fact that the Deputy Minister of Finance was a woman. That's a big position in the Ministry of Finance, and women roles within the Palestinian Authority were, obviously known and accepted, but it wasn't really thought about in terms of this is something that we should be proud of. This is something that we should, think about for a minute. And so we produced a video that was, I think it provoked a lot of thought process among ministry staff about the different types of people that are working within the government levels.
Very good. All right. Before we shuffle along, any more questions there for Miles on? Yep. I know.
Hi, here we go. Yeah, I just wanted to ask, but what's your take on the future of the medium? I mean, we've all heard all this talk about Facebook not being, that big in the future, and so what do you think is going to happen? And what medium do you think we're going to be using in 5 years' time or 3 years' time?
So, I mean, that's a fun question because, in particular, I happen to agree that Facebook's days aren't, they're numbered. I mean, every social media service has a period that everybody's in love with it, and then everybody kind of falls out of love with it. And I think that Facebook will inevitably be one of those casualties, just like MySpace. But I think that the content and the purpose of social media stays the same in the sense that we want to interact with people, we want to tell our story, we want to get the message out. So now that we've done Facebook advertising, now that we've done producing video and putting it up on Facebook and sharing it with people, it doesn't matter what the new service is or will be. I'm sure that the layout will be different and the purpose of it will be different and the ways that we share content will be different. But at the end of the day, the content that we tell, the stories that we tell through video, photos, websites, blog entries, all of that will inevitably be similar. In the same way that people wrote newspaper articles before, people developed radio content before, people developed television shows before. All of this is about telling our story, and I think that we'll continue on no matter what the platform is.
Yeah, I have a question. I wanted to know. So you just mentioned content for radio, video content, mobile content. I read all of the different types of medium. Have you ever come across a problem where you wanted to sort of advertise one message, and there were so many different avenues or so many different types of ways in which this message could go out that they caused some sort of problem in how the message was sent out or how it was received or whatnot?
No, I mean, actually, we quite often have to really think about what our audiences are, and we want, especially now more than ever in my work, people want everyone in the world to know about their cause, their website, their video, their campaign, and it seems daunting at times, and part of our role is to help focus the best possible results based on what we know will work. And I think, we've produced a lot of campaigns over the years. I think what typically ends up working the best is when you can isolate a few countries or a few interest topics that are really relevant to your work, and then focusing on those people first, so that you're not pushing a video out to the entire world. You're not pushing a video out to the entire population of India, for example. You're looking at within India, if your topic is, if your video is about land rights, or your video is about agriculture reform, or your video is about health, you can focus in on groups within India or organizations that exist within India and focus on those people who will help share your message for you, who are already passionate about that issue, and it'll be a lot more effective than just blindly letting loose the campaign to anyone. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, it does.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, actually, just to follow up on that. Sorry, Miles. I agree with you on the one-size-fits-all thing being really out of date now. And I'm thinking about a video that I saw, I think last year. I shouldn't name the group, but it was a global health group, and it was full of celebrity endorsements, and it was basically asking for a huge sum of money, a fundraising target that had to be met. And for me, that kind of thing just falls really flat. I don't think you can appeal, in that kind of one-size-all, really expensive, massively produced video that's just supposed to generically fly on Facebook. And I don't know what the reason is for that. What are the things that have changed in the last 10 years to make that product so out of date and so irrelevant? But I think I agree with your point.
Absolutely. So for those of you who are just joining us, we're talking here to Miles Cedric, coming to us from Virginia, and Burness Digital, co-director there at Burness Communications. If you're on YouTube or Google+, send us your questions, join the discussion. We'll happily field those and get to them as we can. But now we'd like to shift focus there, if we can, Miles. And I think we began to head that way, and it seems as though that's where everyone's interest is what's happening now. Tell us about the things that you're doing in Burness now. And I'll hand over to Johannes to field you your first question.
Yeah, well, you've basically already named where we're going. After many years on the road, you're now back in the U.S. and I assume it's quite a big change from working on the ground in such a small space as the West Bank with such a specific targeted community, and now you're back at headquarters basically, and working with a number of different non-profit groups from around the world, as I understand. So, what sort of are the main things that have changed for your day-to-day work?
I have to take a big breath, a big kind of sigh of relief here, and tell you that the best thing about this work now that I'm doing is that by not being linked to a major wing of a governmental organization, meaning my work with USAID, by working with nonprofits who have a variety of different funding sources, I think that the ability to get messages out to people is a lot more open, and it's really exciting. I think the main thing that kind of gets me up in the morning and gets me excited about what we do is we have a lot of clients that are willing to say, okay, we really feel passionately about tuberculosis research, and we want people to know about it, and we're going to produce this amazing, video series, and we're gonna push it out to people all across the world. We're going to focus on African countries. We're going to build awareness on tuberculosis research. We're going to, we're going to directly target people to get that message out, and I think that that's really exciting. I think in years past, we'd had a number of really good experiences reaching out to people, but now more than ever, with a lot of nonprofits that we work with, people are willing to take a bit more risks, and I think that that's been really exciting. It's not easy to put your name out there. It's not easy to kind of get all of this attention and see all these comments coming on Facebook and having to reply to them, and it certainly it adds on to the amount of work that folks that we work with have to do, but we help them through that, and I think in the end it's a really valuable experience. And I have a few really good examples, I think, of what we've been working on, but I wanted to try, if I could, to use the screen sharing just really quick to show you guys a couple of different examples. So let's see. So you guys can all see this now?
We can. Yeah.
Okay, great. So this is an example, and by the way, this is not promotional at all for any of the organizations we work on. It's more just the examples that I wanted to go through as far as social media campaigns are concerned. This is one example that I was just talking about with tuberculosis. These 4 videos were created as part of a campaign to build awareness about tuberculosis. And so when we talk about taking a video and pushing it out to the world, this is certainly one way to do it. This is an actual video post from the ARIS Facebook page that has some description of the chapter of the video. The video is broken up into 4 different chapters. This one is about the rise of the superbug, and so what we did was we built a campaign to push the video out to people throughout Africa, the EU, and the US. And we got some really wonderful comments and questions and shares from people. This is one example. This is from chapter 2. Every chapter had a different result as we were trying to get awareness from different types of organizations and different groups. But I think what was exciting about this one was just seeing the comments coming in and the shares. I mean, 345 shares is a really big deal when you're trying to build awareness of a video. Having 345 organizations and people share this video out to their own friends and family, I think says a lot about how passionate people feel about this particular campaign. Another example I was going to show was the work that we did with Gates Foundation on, let's see, it was back in, let's see, not last fall, but the year before. The EU was going to vote on reduced or cut funding, really, for research and development for diseases, and the Gates Foundation and several other groups felt that it was really important that the EU continue to fund R&D, and so we produced an animated video that had some really interesting content about the importance of R&D, pushed that out through social media, and this video was also shown at a number of high-profile events in the EU, and it was really exciting to see the results come in, not only on YouTube, this isn't a crazy number of hits, but there was a really good reaction from people in events that would then go and share this with other people and get the message out. And ultimately what was exciting was the EU did decide to fund R&D, and we felt like it was a pretty big win, and this was one piece of the puzzle. There was a lot of traditional media outreach that happened simultaneously, and a lot of other efforts that were happening on the ground, but we felt like this was one piece of the puzzle that helped to ensure that the EU would continue funding for R&D. The last of these 4 quick examples I want to show you guys is for the Brookings Institution. We wanted to get a video that would help describe something that was fairly complex. This may resonate with some of you in the sense that your work sometimes can be difficult to describe to people, and so it's helpful to produce a video or have some kind of really simple language to help describe what it is that you do. And with the complex topic of suburban poverty in America, that topic is difficult to digest, and I think we wanted to at least open the discussion for what suburban poverty looks like in America. And we produced a video that tells that story in a way that I think helps people to feel more engaged. And so that's just a little bit from some of the work I do. I hope it gives some examples of what it was that we did. But I don't know if there's any questions on those 4 examples.
Actually, my question was about, it seems that you're very heavily focused on video. Is that like the kind of the biggest component of your portfolio when you work with clients? Is it because that's what the clients want, or you like doing that, or do you also do other kinds of multimedia content?
We do, and thanks for asking that. A lot of times what works even better than video, to be honest, are photos with text overlay. I mean, if you have a simple photo of, fruits and vegetables, and the text overlay is, about healthy eating, or if you have one about agriculture, and your text overlay is about the importance of government funding of agriculture initiatives in such and such country. Those images are easily shared, and they're also really easy to understand, and I think people gravitate towards sharing those with their own friends much easier than video. I think we all know that the attention span of people on the internet is extremely short, and so just looking at an image and seeing that text is really powerful sometimes. But we do produce a lot of video content. These videos were just part of campaigns, so I thought that they would serve as an example of what a campaign looks like beyond just video production. But I think we often produce campaigns that are built around images, or even sometimes reports or materials that people want to share, slides, audio content, podcasts. It can be anything. It's just creating that vehicle that you then use, the media that you create, to then transport it all around the world. You need something to kind of grab people, and so sometimes it's video that works the best. With suburban poverty, for example, we needed a video to explain what suburban poverty is, but for some other things we found images work just as well.
You mentioned there, Miles, the frivolity that people don't really have a lot of time these days to be reading a whole bunch of content, and certainly for videos that's also true. Is there kind of a sweet spot in terms of length you kind of aim for when you do produce videos for the web and for social media?
Samuel, I know that you will probably know exactly what I'm saying, in that there are a lot of people who feel like their 30-minute message is really important, that everybody needs to watch it. And it's so hard to get people to watch 30 minutes. It's nearly impossible. If you can't boil it down to a minute or two, maybe 3, it's just hard to get that kind of viewership. And actually, to be honest, when we run campaigns, a lot of times we see the drop-off rates in YouTube videos is astounding. I mean, people barely make it past a minute. There are some videos we produced where, especially if it's a training video and the purpose is to go through a series of topics that are relevant to people as far as a training series, they'll watch all the way through. But with something even like the suburban poverty video or some of the tuberculosis videos that I shared, the viewing rates really did kind of trail off after a certain point. And so you have to keep that in mind. You have to keep in mind that your main message really needs to be up front. You need to think about how to boil it down and how to get things as concise as possible so that people will understand and want to share.
Yeah, absolutely. That makes a lot of sense. I guess for me, videos are a good tool because you can do that storytelling really, really well and make it visual as well. Thinking about those drop-off rates, has that kind of affected the way that you tell your stories, or do you keep that in mind as you're producing them? So at the 60-second or 70-second mark, a lot of people tune out. Do you sort of have an attention-grabbing thing at that point in time, or does that even sort of come into the mix when you are producing a video?
We always have a goal of trying to keep things concise, but I wouldn't let the time code or the time, this notion in my head of what a good video length is, I wouldn't let that dictate what a story is.
Yeah.
I think, as you know, when you develop a really powerful story, or somebody's telling a really powerful story, if it goes 3 minutes, it goes 3 minutes, and that's the story that you need to tell. But I think we just try from the very beginning to get people to think about, in the simplest sense, what is the message you're trying to share with people, and how can we boil it down? How can we make it so that A, people understand it, B, they want to watch and they want to be engaged, and C, they want to share it with people. And so, we didn't expect, for example, with a training video that we produced, that it was a 6-minute video actually on 8 steps in palliative care, which is all about end-of-life treatment for people. It's a very kind of somber topic, but for the medical community, that training video was really powerful, and it got a lot of wonderful comments from people on Facebook. We didn't expect that 18-year-olds would watch that video from minute 1 all the way to minute 6. We knew that we had a specific focus on the medical community and on nurses and on people that were dealing with palliative care or end-of-life issues, and that was our focus, and we were really successful in getting lots of great comments from people that were interested in that particular topic.
Yeah. Okay, Denise.
Yeah.
Sorry, I know.
Yeah, Miles, I just was a bit curious. I wanted to ask, how's your daily routine? What's your daily work look like and at Burness, and how do you deal with your clients, and just curiosity.
Sure. So I think Denise's cat is also really excited about hearing that. So to give you an example, right now I'm in Richmond, Virginia. We're filming a series on inner city poverty in Richmond. So I'm actually in a hotel room where we have a shoot scheduled for later this morning. So basically, it's a combination of being out filming, gathering interview content, gathering B-roll for videos, and then being back at the office and running campaigns, or simultaneously. We have a team of people that work together on coming up with campaign strategy. We have people that are running Facebook campaigns all the time, checking up on them, looking on Google AdWords, making sure that a Twitter campaign is running well, keeping track of everything, writing up the final reports on how a campaign worked. And then we also go out and shoot a lot of content, and both video and photography, and produce content for clients that we work with. So that's a little bit of kind of the day-to-day, but I could go in more detail if you'd like.
No, it sounds exciting, by the way.
Oh, thanks. Thanks a lot. That's great.
Very good. Got a question coming in here from YouTube. and it's from Shah Turner, also one of our commenters on the
Oh, great.
on the event earlier. He says, "Hi, it's Shah here from Perth in WA." He says, "One of the issues with social media is the audience can be limited only to people who are already interested." He says, "How can these campaigns gain awareness through a link to everyday products?" And he wants to know, have you heard of the Thank You Water campaign?
The Thank You Water campaign. I'm trying to think if I've heard of that. I don't think I have, but I think it's a really valuable question. I think a lot of us, especially people that work in the nonprofit sector, worry about the echo chamber or just talking to ourselves. And I think social media campaigns really help us to break that down, because if we were only using our own connections, we would really just be talking to ourselves. But when we can target people on Facebook that are beyond our typical reach, or beyond our ability to reach people, then I think we're getting the message out to people that that will really benefit from it. And I think I heard a really good example of people using Google AdWords to target people in the United States based on zip code, so that if you can imagine people within a specific zip code searching for Reebok shoes, deodorant, pizza places, whatever they're searching for, if you're targeting that specific zip code on Google AdWords, they'll see on the right column of their Google search results, or right under the search results, they'll see your particular ad. And if your ad is somehow linked to an upcoming vote or an awareness campaign for people that live in that specific geographic area, then people that were actually searching for Reebok shoes or for pizza will see your website. And to me, that's amazing. That kind of opens all kinds of doors where you think to yourself, okay, we're actually reaching people that are really not interested in what we have to say, but we're getting their attention, and we're getting our media in front of them, and we're getting our cause in front of them. And I think especially for the voting public, that's a really valuable tool. But it still brings up the question of, what about the people that are not using social media? And I think that we will have that problem no matter where we go, especially in countries where internet access is difficult to obtain, or it's expensive. I think that there's still a huge role for radio, and I think that more traditional outreach efforts are probably better worth your time and your efforts. Radio played a huge role in the West Bank. It still does. It's not going anywhere. People listen to it on the way to work. People listen to it at home. And I think that if I were running a campaign in the West Bank right now, I would definitely include a radio campaign as part of the effort.
Very good. Now, Shah also just adds as a end to that question that the Thank You Water campaign essentially ran like when someone in a privileged country buys water, some of the proceeds from that profit go toward helping someone else gain access to drinking water in an underprivileged country or developing country.
Okay.
Yeah, so there's a brand in Australia, I'm not sure if it's also around the world, for mosquito repellent called Off, and that could be linked to something like helping malaria victims, and could then, I guess he says, could help reach a wider audience that isn't already seeing the videos. So there's another way, I guess, of attacking it.
Right. That's really valuable.
But I had a question for you as well, Miles. So we all know, and I think you just mentioned there about Google AdWords and driving traffic. So we all know that a lot of what social media is to drive traffic and to get people to your blog, to your campaign, to your website, and to take them through the process from there. It's a medium or a means to an end. Are there any concerns or challenges that you've sort of faced or come up against recently that you've had to overcome?
That's a good question. I think that in all of our work, we're worried, I think, about a crisis situation unfolding. So here's an example. On Facebook, I mentioned before that a lot of times if people post hateful or spam content, we opt to just not engage with those people. On Facebook, you also do run the risk, though, of people overreacting to either a message that was hidden or maybe a message that wasn't responded to, and then that escalating into something that completely detracts the audience's attention from your overall kind of mission or goal, and twists it into a crisis situation that unfortunately takes up a lot of time and resources. I think that every group we've worked with, we've had a conversation with at some point saying, you need to be very thoughtful, and you need to be very mindful, and you need to be prepared. You need to have, at least in your own group, a little bit of a, maybe a 20 or 30-minute meeting or maybe more about what it is that you would do in that situation, how you would react, because we've seen, unfortunately, we've seen in the past few years some organizations that clearly weren't prepared and then had to kind of dig themselves out. There was the KitchenAid example. I don't know if you all remember that one, where the KitchenAid mixers, a member of their team had Twitter installed on his or her phone. They were using the official KitchenAid handle on their phone, and they tweeted out something that was really not appropriate and very offensive through the KitchenAid brand on their Twitter page, and it exploded into a really embarrassing situation for the company. And I think people remember that. It's not going to affect things maybe 5 years down the line, but it is something that at that particular moment took an amazing amount of resources to fix. And I just think having people aware and prepared for that is really, really helpful. And being thoughtful in who in your organization has your Twitter account installed on their phone is really important. You need to think about that. You need to think about what happens in that kind of a mistake, what happens in that kind of scenario, and what you would do.
Yeah, that's brilliant. There was one actually recently, or semi-recently, maybe last year sometime, where it was quite clever, I guess, and I think it was Sweden. The Ministry of Tourism decided to invite one of the members of the public in Sweden to every week be their social media coordinator and sort of run. This is my favorite part of Sweden. This is right to go and sort of just sharing things around the place, and that went all well and good for a few weeks. So they got some, I guess, people who enjoyed doing that and took it quite seriously. And then it took one joker to not take it so seriously, and the same sort of thing happened. And I guess it's in the history books now, but can be effective, can also be a big disaster, and there's something to be mindful of.
Yeah.
Oh, just to complement what Samuel is saying, I would assume that sort of campaign would have to have a sort of buffer. I don't know. I'm not sure if there's any app or tool that allows you to control what is sent out. For example, Facebook's privacy settings. Yes, it's all complicated, but there are ways where you can be notified if something is posted about you. So is there any sort of tool like that you can use to sort of control what one brand uses or what one brand sends out?
There are tools that you can use, like you said, on Facebook. The privacy settings can be tweaked, and you can spend a lot of time setting up those privacy settings. Ultimately, though, if somebody has access to your account, they can do things that you wouldn't want. And so I think that while the technology exists to make those things a little bit less likely, at the end of the day, it's really just informing people. I think that's the most effective. I would rather, and on our team, we talk about this frequently, I would rather have people ready to work on or ready to respond to a crisis than spend 3 or 4 hours setting privacy concerns and really trying to, because those things always they can work against you too. The more you kind of restrict those privacy settings, then when you need your colleague to post something and they can't, you have to spend hours troubleshooting why and trying to figure it out. So I don't know if that's really the best answer. I think there's probably a lot of people that have the magic recipe for privacy settings, but I think that it's more of just on a personal level, having those conversations with people.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
I had a question for you, Miles, and it's kind of a more general, broad question, I guess, for yourself. Non-profit advertising, social media campaigns. You, as co-director for Burness Digital, how do you quantify that to organizations that approach you? How do you sort of reflect to them your return on investment? I guess each of those organizations have different goals, certainly as a non-profit compared to, say, a for-profit company. But how do you sort of quantify that, and what are your typical measures that you would to take to give that return on investment?
I'm really glad you asked that, because we actually just had this conversation a couple days ago with a nonprofit that said to us, we believe in social media. We know that it's important for us to be involved in it. We also have a hard time, though, spending our limited resources on advertising. It felt strange to them. You know, when we were having a conversation about, obviously, the power of social media. We all know it. We all know that it's important to reach out to people. We all know that it would be great to reach out to people that you don't have connections with, so advertising does make sense. What we tell them, though, is that, and this is, I think, a way to kind of quantify the dollars that you're spending. When we run a campaign, like, for example, one of the video campaigns I showed you, and it was part of a Facebook strategy, we're talking about 5 cents per click, but it's not even 5 cents per view of that video. It's actually 5 cents per view plus comments, shares, likes, activity. All of those things that you saw on the Facebook page are all linked back to that 5 cents per view. That's what we got on that particular campaign. I can't always guarantee that it will be 5 cents, but it will be something similar. And if you think about how valuable it is to get your message out to people, 5 cents in US dollars for someone to watch a video or be engaged or share it with their friends or get your message out to people in countries that you can't go to, or that it would be way too expensive for you to go to, that's really the only way to reach those people. It's really the best, most efficient, low-cost way to reach people. And I think that any nonprofit supporter, or someone like, for example, if my cousin were to give $100 to a nonprofit, I can't see how they would be upset about that kind of a result, in the sense that the objective of the organization is to inform people. The objective of the organization is to try and help people, and that's a really low-cost way to do it. So I think that ultimately we can pull data to show nonprofits that it's worth every penny, and that it's really the best way to get your message out to people.
Yeah, brilliant. So we're going to wrap up here in a couple of minutes. Guys, anyone from here on the Hangout got any more questions? And certainly those of you following along on Google Plus and YouTube, shoot us through your comments. Guys, over to you. No further questions?
No, I'm out of questions.
Brilliant. Okay, well, I just want to, I guess, thank you very much, Miles, for joining us today. It really has been a pleasure and very insightful listening to your comments and insights into the West Bank and what that was like during a very tumultuous time, I think. And certainly getting those public service announcements out to the general population. I think that's incredibly important and went a long way to developing the culture and the people there, which is fantastic. And certainly now, I guess, for me, learning there about 5 cents per video view, which is brilliant. I think if we can always get that, then we're doing something right. But I think for all of us in that sort of world where money can be scarce and isn't always used for communications or marketing, because that isn't necessarily where the end result is. It's good to see that you can quantify that and take that to the powers that be to give that information and to keep it rolling, because it is always important to keep this kind of thing happening. And video, brilliant tool. I love it myself, and I think if we could do more, it'd be really, really good. So thank you very much, Miles. And thank you to those joining us today. Co-host Denise Young. Thank you very much, Denise, in Paris. Thanks, Sam. Thanks, Miles. And Johannes as well there at ICSU in Paris.
Thank you, Sam, and thank you, Miles, for joining us.
Thank you. And Karen in Trinidad Tobago.
Thanks very much for the invite. It was very a new experience for me.
Great. And Arno, thanks for joining us there from Barcelona.
Thanks for having me. It's been great. Thanks.
Good. Thank you all. This will be available on YouTube as we conclude here, and I hope to see you again in the near future for the next one. So thanks all very much. Those of you on the Hangout, don't go anywhere just yet. We'll turn off the broadcast and have a quick debrief. Thanks a lot, and thanks to everyone on YouTube and Google+.